It's Monday, February 17th, 2020, on the special edition of Roland Martin Unfiltered on President's Day. We talk with journalist Ed Gordon about his new book, Conversations with a number of top African-American luminaries about what is needed to advance Black America. Also, we'll hear from Black entrepreneurs from the Culture Shift Technology Conference, how we can advance African Americans in the field of technology. It's time to bring the funk. Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, Ed Gordon, you've got a host of folks you have talked with regarding your book, Conversations in Black, on power, politics, and leadership. First and foremost, what was it that you want, or what is it that you wanted to achieve with this book?
I want us to start thinking about new narratives. You know, Roland, you and I have talked about for many years the many town hall meetings, panels, and the like we do, and it seems as though our complaints have been that we're talking about the same things over and over and over again. And so at some point, I think we've reached a ceiling and we have to find new narratives. And I hope that this conversation will spark the idea that it's time for us to look to new narratives to move forward beyond where we have. We've achieved a lot, but certainly have a long way to go still for equality and justice in this country.
Now, were these all original interviews? Were they taken from various interviews you've done with folks over the years?
No, these were all original interviews. Took me about 7 months or so. I wanted the book to be as current as possible and was blessed to have the myriad of folks. We did 40 plus influencers and leaders to talk about the state of Black America, and each chapter is a different topic, and it runs the gamut from politics to pop culture. So we talk about any number of things, including obviously the 2020 election.
And when you talk about those topics, one of the things that obviously you deal with is not just Donald Trump, but also President Barack Obama.
Yeah, there's a reflection of the Obama years. You know, so many people talk about the forever my president, and they wistfully think about those 8 years that the president was in office. But I suggest to them that, listen, you know, we've got to live beyond that. That president is doing mighty well for himself right now. We've got to concern ourselves with how we're doing and how the community is doing. But we do have a reflection. You know, you and I have talked about historically how presidents are gauged, and you need a historical distance from their administration often to really kind of see what that administration was. And so we take a look back at those 8 years and see where the African-American community landed. And it's also insightful because we have people like Eric Holder in the book, who obviously was right there front and center.
Well, one of the things I think is interesting is when I look at what Mark Morial had to say when he said the National Urban League did a report on President Obama and found that one of the things we struggle with was the standard by which we evaluate Barack Obama. Do we evaluate him in comparison to what I call the mythical super Negro, super politician, Superman standard? Here's what I don't quite understand, okay? He was the 44th president. How did the National Urban League evaluate other presidents? Isn't the standard simply you look at the issues you care about, and then where does the president come down on it? I think that statement right there, with all due respect to my frat brother Mark Morial, speaks to the problem of Black leadership. That what happened was we kept looking at Obama as the first and ignored that he was the 44th.
Yeah, and I think you'll see that in the book. There's a chapter about black leadership, and there's a chapter about, within that chapter, I should say, we talk about what I see as untouchables in our community, at least publicly. And that would be President Obama, civil rights organizations, civil rights leaders, HBCUs. Sometimes it's difficult for us to find ways to evaluate them publicly fairly. But what you will find is there are those who suggest that even though there was that dichotomy of how you judge President Obama, there were some very frank discussions in the book about the things that people thought he did right, and certainly some of the things that people thought he did wrong, or certainly had missteps as relates to a community that gave you 95+% of their vote.
I love what Harry Belafonte had to say when he talked about how do we evaluate black leaders today, when he says that America is in a crisis. I have no faith that what we have achieved in the past will bear fruit in the president, the Black Caucus, and a number of people who sit as the voice of Black America have their work to do. And I think what people always forget is that the reality is every generation is responsible for doing their part. In fact, that was something that I was talking to Bernard Shaw a few months ago when I was talking about NABJ, when we were going after CNN for no black leadership. He said, every generation has had to do this. Now it's your turn.
Yeah, and I think that you see that. And the other thing that happens with every generation is there's that generational shift of power, if you will, and nobody wants to concede that power when they've been the leaders for X number of generations. We're starting to see that shift. Mr. Belafonte is one example. Jesse Jackson is another. These people who've been long in the tooth in this fight have been on the front lines for so very long, but it's difficult sometimes for leaders like Reverend Jackson and others to step away and concede that there's another group behind you and perhaps that should be in front of you now to lead this fight. And so what I'm most proud of within this book is the very frank and honest conversations that I think are had between those. It's interesting because the book reads as if we're having a genuine and actual conversation, as you might imagine, with the 40+ people. The caliber of trying to pull all of those calendars together would have been impossible to get us all in the room together, but it reads as if we were having a discussion. So I was kind of the linchpin, and then I put the responses together so it reads as though we're all talking.
Well, the thing that I think, even on that particular point there, I have to go to North Carolina A&T for the 60th anniversary of the lunch counter sit-ins, and which obviously was led by 4 freshmen in North Carolina A&T. And I've already decided what my title is going to be, and that is, you don't need permission to stand up. I think one of the biggest issues that I have is that we want certain people to move aside, as opposed to, no, you keep doing what you do, but then now I'm also going to do what I do. I think that when I think about party elders, Republicans who are Democrats, there were people who, again, who used to be like the really, really, really powerful folks who moved sort of into an emeritus status, or people still called upon them, still reached out to them, and they still use their influence. And I think there's always this constant fight. Why can't you just move aside? No. Why don't you actually step up? And I think about historically, I think about Roy Wilkins, who called Dr. King a radical because he was a young gun on the scene, and then they did their thing, but the NAACP still existed. I look at SNCC and CORE, all these different groups. So there's space in here, but it was amazing how so many people want certain folks. We just need y'all to get out of the way, because the problem, when you start throwing away institutional knowledge and throwing away people who can literally pick the phone up and make one phone call, where you still trying to find a phone number.
And that's exactly right. And that's the kind of consensus that we have, and certainly the end result of that chapter. I talk about the idea that it's not about eliminating one person. I mean, historically, you think about A. Philip Randolph. Many, and I mentioned this in the book, many historians will say that he was really the father and the birther, if you will, of the civil rights movement, yet King is, the iconic personification of it. So we've had this for many, many generations, but I think you're right, and that's what I try to come to the conclusion, that it's not an either or. I mean, you can have both. And I think that that's what's of import for all of us to determine, that we're all in this together at the end of the day. You know, if we continue to see the country as it goes, they're not going to pick and choose which black folk they want. They don't really want any of us. So I think it's incumbent and important for all of us to stick together. I think about, you know, what you're doing with your show. I mentioned in the book the discussions that you and I have had constantly about how African Americans, when they see us, you and I, on CNN or CBS or NBC, they are more excited than if they see us on BET or TV One or your own entity as you're doing here. We've got to get away from this kind of thinking. We've got to start to believe that the power we wield is our power and not given to us by somebody else.
I think the chapter on black men is quite interesting. A lot of people, we're operating in this space right now of black girl magic. And I totally, understand that. I also understand historically how patriarchy has played a critical role, how so many women were completely left out and are still left out of the Black freedom movement narrative, other than Rosa Parks and maybe a couple of others. But when you look at politically, in 2012, there was a 9-point gap between black men and black women voting for President Barack Obama over Mitt Romney. In 2016, it was a 13-point gap in terms of the percentage of black men who voted for Donald Trump compared to black women who voted for Hillary Clinton. And the White House is still trumpeting that. Polls right now show that Trump could very well get 15% of the black male vote. The White House is talking about they think they can push that to 20%. And so how do we truly deal with this whole issue of historical patriarchy, but then you have so many black men who feel as if they're not being left out of all these conversations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we discussed in this is that we have to start better conversations amongst those of us who are in this game. And in this game, I mean all of the black men who are out here, those of us who have had the pleasure and blessing of making it to a certain degree, and those who are still struggling. You know, Roland, you and I have talked to many young brothers and trying to talk to them about where they sit and where their stances come from, and how they've kind of gleaned the sense of manhood, often a misguided sense of what manhood is. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really sit down. What I will applaud sisters for, and what they've done better through Essence and other means, is kind of have this sense of camaraderie and a sense of togetherness. And I don't know that we've found that enough in trying to define what modern day manhood is all about and the expectation of what that should be. I think fraternities do it well in one sense, but I think it's got to be a broader base, a broader scope. And that's one of the things that I hope this new narrative will bring about, the idea that black men have a tremendous amount of power, intellect, sway, strength, and that we've not utilized it to its fullest potential. And I think that we've got to make sure that we move to do that.
I want to talk about the chapter on economics. And one of the things that I've often talked about, and I've said this, is that when you have these discussions about economics, or actually what are the top issues facing black America, oftentimes money would not even be in the top 5. We'll talk about mass incarceration, we'll talk about police brutality, we'll talk about all these other things, as opposed to money, which is actually central to so many of those different things. And I also talk about the fact that when we do talk about money, we're not having a discussion with people who literally own, run, and operate businesses. And so when you were putting this together, the folks to talk to here, and I'm looking at the people in this particular chapter, were you also thinking about that, those who pontificate about money, wealth building, things along those lines, and those who actually make it a part of their daily life, that is, they own something and are building something?
Well, it's interesting because I thought about the broad-based issue of how often we've talked about money over the years and still haven't figured out how, in fact, to master that game. We've mastered a lot of corners as African American people. We've mastered a lot of corners that we've been pushed out of or kept out of for many years. And the economic puzzle and the sense of money and how we gain power from money has not been one of those corners that we have mastered. You're exactly right. And that is why I picked some of the folks that I selected. Rich Lou Dennis, who, not only became a brilliant owner of Shea Moisturizer and is one of those folks, he and his mother are close to being the next list of those billionaires, those black billionaires that we like to talk about. And obviously his purchase of Essence Magazine and bringing that back into black ownership was so very important. But I wanted to talk to people who weren't just talking about it in theory, but who were actually doing it, who actually were making money and also turning that money into power. And he's a great example of that being done.
This chapter on media, you call it the Medea dilemma. Why?
Say that again, Roland. I didn't hear you.
The chapter on media, you call it the Medea dilemma. Why?
Yeah, I think that what we found with Tyler Perry is there are still a lot of people who are ridiculously proud of what he's been able to do as a mogul, but still have some sense of a dilemma as to whether or not they think that his art is buffoonery or not. It's one of those things. Jamie Foxx once told me, you have a double-edged sword as an African-American entertainer. He says, a Jewish comedian can come out and joke about eating bagels and lox, but I have to think about the idea of what I owe my people and whether I can do a joke about fried chicken and watermelon. And so there's this dichotomy of us being proud of him on one hand and in some corners questioning the art that he puts out on another. I fall under the category that he can't be all things to all people. There are millions of people who love his art and what he does. And most importantly, he's been able to turn that in to becoming one of the most powerful people in Hollywood, and certainly all the things that he's done for African Americans as an individual, particularly in crisis situations. And I think that that's how we need to start to judge people. If you don't like the movies, you don't have to go to those movies. But it's an interesting conversation that is had amongst all of those in the book. Again, 40 plus people, not all 40 in every chapter, but we've got voices from everywhere. And I also talk about the importance of news and being able to tell your own stories. Again, a conversation that you and I have had privately for many, many years.
I sort of laugh at the whole back and forth that people have with Medea. And the reason I do is because Dustin Hoffman put on a dress, Tootsie. Robin Williams, Mrs. Doubtfire,
Gerald
put on the dress.
Wilson, decades ago.
Flip Wilson as well. And then people go back and forth, well, when it comes to black masculinity, but the reality is I've seen a whole bunch of, strong black men. I really believe, and this is just flat out, I really believe that one of the fundamental issues, which I think from beginning of this book go to the end, is that one of the biggest issues that we face is a desperate need for a massive reprogramming of black America. And what I mean by that is when, so like for instance, right now, all these people, you got all the people who are all upset and they're trashing Tyler Perry's movie, A Fall from Grace, on Netflix. Bruh, do you know how many movies I could watch on Netflix that made by other people? And some I think are bad, some I think are good, some I think are great, but I'm not sitting here just losing my mind. I just think that Tyler Perry has become this huge bullseye. And I think a lot of people, I think a lot of it's jealousy. I think there is this belief that one person somehow has to be all things to all of us, when the fact of the matter is, I can look at movies by Tyler Perry, by Spike Lee, by Malcolm Lee, by Antoine Fuqua, by Ava DuVernay, by Sally Richardson Whitfield. I can name so many different black directors, but it's just interesting to me the visceral reaction that people have towards Tyler Perry.
I agree, and that's why we spent so much time in talking about this quote unquote dilemma in the chapter. And I think I agree with you 100%. I talk about Woody Allen and the movies that he made over the years.
And I haven't seen one of them. I have not watched a single Woody Allen movie from beginning to end because they don't appeal to me.
And that's my point.
But Chris Rock loves them.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, and that's my point. And I agree with you 100%. It was the same thing that many people had grief with BET when it first started to come into its popularity. We have to stop thinking about these one chair, one seat, one opportunity things for African Americans, because you can't be all things to all people. Tyler Perry is just one talented person in a myriad of talented people that should be given opportunity in Hollywood to make all different kinds of movies. So I think that this sense of reevaluation, if you will, in terms of how we look at things, what we produce, what we deem. We talk about, there's a chapter called Am I Black Enough for You? It goes back to that whole question of who defines authentically black, who hands out these mythical black cards, and that notion. We've got to start talking about some things that we've let lie on the table for far too long, and we hope that that's what this book will do. We encourage people to read it with a group of folks and start your own conversations, and then most importantly, don't let it stay and die on the vine as a conversation. You need to move this to actionable items.
I do. What I do find very interesting when I hear, because you talk to in this piece about losing our voice in the news, you talk to Sarah Glover, former NABJ president, Butch Graves with Black Enterprise, Susan Taylor, editor emeritus of Essence, Michael Eric Dyson, Killer Mike, Van Lathan, Tiffany Cross, Reverend Al Sharpton, Richelieu Dennis. Here's what I really, really, really find interesting about this, and it is something that I've been critical on. And that is, I cannot name, and I've tried to figure out what was the last in terms of, I guess probably would be when Interactive One, which is owned by Urban One, bought Global Grind. And the reality is, you do not see any level of consolidation or acquisitions or merging or partnerships among black media. So you've got all of these ISOs. You've got Blavity, you've got Interactive One with News One, you've got The Grio, you've got The Source, and you've got Essence and Black Enterprise, and then you've got all these, but you literally have all these ISOs, and you don't have scale. And what's interesting to me is that when you look at, frankly, white media, Rupert Murdoch sold Fox Entertainment to Disney, $60-70 billion. You look at NBC, Comcast buying NBC Universal. We can go on and on and on. Yet one of the reasons I think we don't have strong, powerful black-owned media is because we got black folks who simply refuse to partner.
And it's not just in the media. We talk about it in the book. I talk about black folk operating in these silos, and that we don't come together. We talk about togetherness. We talk about brotherhood. We talk about doing things together. But typically we don't. And these silos are what allow whites to continue to own and grow while we stay stagnant or regress. There's absolutely no reason that these partnerships shouldn't come to fruition and shouldn't become real and make us, quite frankly, all more powerful.
Including some of the people you talk to. I'm just being straight up.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. Again, folks will talk about this, but then I go, okay, but are you actually doing it? Because here's the reality. Essence Magazine, they make more money from the festival than they do the magazine. Black Enterprise
is the same thing.
Black Enterprise is only in business.
It's the changing dynamic of media. It's a group that hasn't been able to, and look, all magazines across the board are struggling, black, white, or otherwise. But it is the changing dynamic of media, and soon we are going to lose those few voices that we still have out there. And that's why it's imperative to do some of the things that you're trying to do with this, the idea that ownership, there's no one who's going to be able to tell you, that you're no longer going to be able to produce this show and put it out there. It does become an economic factor, and that you've got to be able to find the commerce that will allow you to continue it. But the power is in your hands. And you and I have talked about over the years trying to do things together. And I think that we'll all be smarter is to find these unique partnerships and try to grow in strength, and be more dynamic, more powerful, and reach more people at the end of the day.
And the bottom line is the money's only going to come when you have scale. I mean, at the end of the day,
right. Butch Graves talks about scale, and in his mind, scale for business is even more important to access to capital. He believes that you can get access to capital quicker and more easily than you can build scale, which at the end of the day, as you and I both know, is what takes you from just being in business to be power player in business.
And guess what? Unless you're willing to partner and merge and work with others, you're not going to be able to build scale, which means you're not going to be able to have access to capital. I mean, that's just it. I asked all authors this question and getting their perspective on it, and that is, what was the wow moment for you in any of these conversations where you were like, wow?
I don't know that I had one wow moment per se, Roland, because you and I have had these conversations over the years with most of the people that are in this book. I was most pleased, I think, and the wow moment came from some of the candid nature. Sometimes people are more apt to be more candid with you when you're not sitting in front of a camera, and it's not for just the psychological thought of public consumption that a camera obviously affords you right away. Someone like Maxine Waters, who's always very boisterous and candid out front, but some of the other people became more candid. And of course, someone that you and I both love, Harry Belafonte, who's always candid, put a lot on the line. Stacey Abrams was very candid in her discussion. So I think it was just the candid nature of most of the people in the book that came across to me that gave me kind of that wow factor or that thank you factor for them being that candid with me.
Last question here. Again, in terms of moving forward, I think that we've always had lots of dialogue. I think we talk about, as we open this up, we have panels and we have symposiums, we have summits, we have all of those different things, and I think back to when Tavis did the book with Third World Press, The Covenant.
The Covenant.
And when he came on, when I had him on my WVON radio show, what I said at the outset was, we're going to have this conversation, but I want you to come back, and I need you to come back in 6 months to say what happened. And when the four Black Baptist organizations, they had this big thing at the World Baptist Congress, which I think is in Nashville, and there was a photo that was in Jet magazine. They were all hands outstretched, in form of agreement. And I had one of the pastors on who was the president. He was a pastor based out of Chicago. And I had him on 6 months later, and I said, okay, what have y'all done? And pretty
you
much,
and I think about the
nothing.
panels that we have been on together. You and I have pushed the Urban League and the NAACP when we do these panels to say, okay, after we've done this, we need some accountability. You and I have talked to the Congressional Black Caucus.
That is the biggest, to me, so out of everything, I think the most fundamental issue out of all of these things is, okay, we've had the conversation, we've had the discussion, all of that. What's next? And the accountability. And that's it.
What I try to encourage in this book is not to wait on someone, right? You have the ability to move. You have the ability to make change without an organization, without an agenda, which I think would be helpful from national leaders, a black agenda, something we've been talking about for decades now and haven't found. But the encouragement we hope that comes out of this conversation is to get people to understand in each one of these ventures and these issues and these topics that we talk about, you don't have to wait for someone else to make change and to make it work for you, that you have innately the power and the ability to do it for yourself and to make change. And so we hope that this will be a spark for people to believe in that and to move forward, because if everyone took care of their house, their block, their neighborhood, their city, their state, we'd be a lot better off than just waiting for, the Messiah to come down from the mountain.
Yep, that's it. So, folks, the book is called Conversations in Black on Power, Politics, and Leadership by Ed Gordon. And again, the folks who he's talked to, again, from Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Stacey Abrams, Eric Holder, Jamel Hill, Dio Healy, as well as Tarana Burke, Reverend Dr. William Barber, Susan Taylor, my good friend Harry Belafonte, Ben Crump, and others. And so you definitely want to get your copy. Ed, thanks a bunch.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. But first off, what is Motley Fool Ventures?
Motley Fool Ventures is a corporate venture capital arm of our parent company, The Motley Fool. It's a $150 million early stage venture capital fund.
Looking to do what?
Looking to invest in Series A companies in the technology space.
All right, so for the person out there who has no idea what Series A is, what the hell is Series A?
That's a great question. So we look for companies with at least $500,000 in revenue, looking for an investor to come in to not only provide them some capital, but some knowledge and expertise to help them grow to the next level.
All right, when you say technology, so in sort of what areas? I mean, obviously, Motley Fool, a lot of people don't know, has been doing content.
Yes.
Business content. So
Absolutely.
What are we talking about?
So when we say technology companies, we're looking for startups who are looking at existing industries and using technology to either scale in those industries, create massive efficiencies, or to provide access to consumers who have been previously kind of blocked out. And a lot of fintech falls into that access category.
So let's say, okay, again, somebody's watching right now. What's fintech?
Fintech is the intersection of finance and technology. If you think about a company like a Robinhood, which is making investing in stocks accessible to a broad range of people who were left out of the old system, that would be the fintech and the access, a good example of that.
I mean, sort of what we're doing. So when TV One ended my show, I launched my own digital show. The goal is to build a digital network.
Yes.
And what that's about, because when you look at, there are 8 black cable networks out there, and they do 1,344 hours of content a week, not 1 hour of news. And so African Americans are craving information, but when you look at the sources, we're having to rely on MSNBC or some other outlets, but they are not doing on a consistent basis what is black targeted, black specific. And that's one of the things that we've done. It's not been a bad year, done about 100 million views, wow. 345 million minutes. And so the audience is saying we want more of it. And I think that's sort of, where we're going, I believe, is that, look, we're 24 years away from the nation being a majority of people of color. And so what is happening is people of color who are black, who are Latino, who are Asian, Native American, they're saying, okay, I'm not getting what I need from existing entities because, frankly, they don't look like me. They're not run by people who look like me. And I think that's what's going on. And I think corporations better understand that, otherwise they're going to be turning to other sources.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, the country is getting more diverse and the opportunities are just getting more diverse. I think there's a social element to it, but there's an economic element as well. I mean, there are a lot of consumers who are craving quality opportunities, and it's a great opportunity for people to reach into all audiences to make sure that their message is heard. And when people are underserved, people like you are going to step in.
I mean, look, it was so interesting that our TV One CEO said, hey, we only sold $1 million of advertising for this show. I personally sold $700,000 last year.
Wow.
So it's like,
I didn't have a sales team. That was just me. I'm like, oh, give me that sales team. I can show you how to sell it. And again, but it's under, and so I think one of the things that is happening is that you're having people who are, yes, looking at what's happening in the world. I mean, I look at what Cheddar did, sort of targeting young folks when it comes to business. I think there's so many people make the assumptions that people know what the hell is happening out here, and it's like, no. Having folks who can walk them through, explain these sort of things, teaching, if you will, educating, which I think leads to empowerment.
Yes, exactly. I think that is empowerment. The power of diversity and inclusion is that you have more opportunities for people to talk to others in a way that they can relate to. You know, and everyone wants to transact with people they can relate to. And without diversity and inclusion, you're going to struggle to reach those audiences.
Well, you know, this is the 4th year that I've attended Culture Shift. The 3rd year we've actually streamed the various sessions. We streamed the session you were on just a few moments ago.
Oh, okay.
And I've had people say, you know, okay, I'm not really understanding all this sort of stuff. And I keep saying that part of the deal, I believe, for African Americans, for Latinos, and for other minorities, is that when you don't know, you don't know. And the reality is, we have been locked out of these conversations for a very long time. And look, let's just be honest, there are very few people who look like you in these industries.
Yes.
I'm sure you walked in that room and went, man, I've never seen this much color at one of these conferences. Because, and look, in fact, I was the other day looking at some of these live streaming conferences and about attending them since we launched this. And I'm looking at the roster of speakers and I'm seeing no black people. And then I start thinking about, man, all the jobs that are in this industry and going, are we not there as well? And all of a sudden it begins to become a multiplier deal. And so I think we have to be able to be exposed to these conversations, which then all of a sudden begins to trigger, I think, the next level and the next wave of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. A lot of what we find when we go out and talk to entrepreneurs, tremendous ideas, but you can see where there's just a foundational element of education that hasn't happened. And the beauty of that is it's nothing that can't be taught. It's nothing that can't be learned, but we have to take the time to lay the foundation, you know?
Somebody's watching right now. As you're surveying the land, what would you be telling folks areas they need to be looking at in terms of where they might want to start something or build something? As we look, you know, let's just forecast the next 5-10 years, where they can be thinking about.
I think this is very much kind of aligned with where we invest. It's not even so much of an area, it's look at the things around you that are being done that are really inefficient and processes that are just not working, just not reaching people who you know want something. The guest we had on before, it was the same idea. He's at a concert, he wants to tip the band and there's no way to do it. I think there's so much opportunity to be had in looking for opportunities where you can see and kind of relate to the problem that's solved. And then the one thing I would say, especially for people starting out, to really think big, right? Is to think big,
Right.
to really get to that the level.
Well, I have people who literally said, so wait, you're going to actually do a 5-day-a-week digital show. They said, and then they thought it was like, oh, I was going to be in my basement. They said, wait, you're going to have guests, you're going to have people. I'm like, yeah. I said, the same show I did before. I said, yeah, we can go digital. And what was interesting about that is folks said I was crazy to do it. And I said, no, I guarantee you, because I said, guys, look, I launched an audio podcast in 2005, a video podcast in 2006.
Wow.
I said, so I was a decade before for most of these people. And what's interesting is that, so we launched in September of 2018, September 4th. And then after that, Fox Nation launched their streaming network. NBC launched theirs. ABC, CBS expanded theirs. And I'm going, oh, so y'all thought I was crazy. and trying to get people to understand that the shift is happening away from old models, and so you can take that and say, now, how can I tweak it to serve a much different audience? And again, it's getting people just to understand that. And I think that is the last question for you. I think the biggest thing for people is fear.
Yes.
Fear of, oh, it might fail. I said, well, hell. I said, it's guaranteed to fail if you never launch it.
Yes, and I'll tell you a story to fail. When we launched the fund, we said we wanted 1,000 investors in our fund. That is probably 40 or 50 times more than the average fund. As far as we know, it's never been done. It's never even been tried before. people were telling me, don't do it, don't do it. Well, in fact, I have to say we failed. We only ended up with 850. You know, it feels great. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. But if we didn't go for the big number, we would have never even gotten close.
All right. Olin, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right.
All right.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
So first and foremost, how'd you get involved in this business?
How did I get involved in this business? So when I think about business, I think of the tech ecosystem, right? And how did I get involved with tech? Originally started when I went to school at Stanford and was a part of Silicon Valley and started getting introduced to the overall ecosystem of the Bay. And through various events and whatnot throughout my career at Stanford, I realized that tech was of interest. And a little further context on myself, I also played football for Stanford as well. And after that chapter closed and I was ready for my next, when I came back and started talking to my mentors and folks that I've met throughout my time in Palo Alto, I started realizing and coming to an understanding of, hey, here's some different options out here, here's some opportunities, and these all different interest me in their own ways. And when I met T3, the firm that I'm with, T3 Advisors, Commercial Real Estate for Tech, real estate now became my vehicle into the tech ecosystem, where I then have the ability and opportunity to work with founders on a day-to-day basis, to partner with VCs who have a plethora of portfolio companies that are doing and changing the world in their own various ways, go and host and run events, meet people, etc. And through that ecosystem is where I met Andrea, right? And where I met her and started learning about the Culture Shift labs and the weekend and being a part of it all. And it's crazy how life works and serendipity of it all. But that's how I originally was hooked, was school and college, and then the relationships that I built along the way.
But you're in an industry that's old, real estate. And the reason I say that is because I think part of the problem with when you talk about this space is the phrase, when you don't know, you don't know. There's a gentleman out of Dallas, and he was raised, and look, what did he know? His parents were like, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Okay? That was the idea in terms of what you're going to do. Goes on, does that, and then he's emergency room physician, and he's sitting on a board, and a fellow board member said, you want to fly with me? He's like, okay. So they're on this guy's private plane, and his first thing he goes is, how'd you get this? What are you doing to get this? And this guy was investing in healthcare companies. So here was a guy who was in healthcare. And he ended up launching his own fund, become highly successful. But he wasn't, but he was introduced to it when he was an adult. He was already in the industry. And that's the thing, I think, for so many of us. The reality is, we only know what we see. Lawyer, doctor, teacher, traditional jobs, because we're not coming across enough of us who are saying, no, I'm in real estate, but in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And having to see people who look like us who are doing it, I think is how we truly begin to change the dynamic of who's in these industries.
100%. And I'll hit on 2 points that you mentioned there, right? First being the overall real estate industry being old, and to me, if you'd told me I'd end up in real estate, I would have told you no chance, right? I told you I got an engineering.
Because your idea of real estate was this.
Oh, exactly, right? Was the dog eat dog kind of, old white men, kind of been doing it for 30, 40 years, sharp elbows, that's
put
not
on some boots, go out, look at a piece of land.
Exactly, right? It's something that I never saw myself a part of, and I think that's to your point, when I was forced to look at that next chapter outside of being a professional football player, right, or professional athlete, which a lot of the youth in our, that come from our communities think of as the end goal. And that was certainly my end goal at one point in time. But when I was forced to make that decision, I started talking to people and learning about these different opportunities and started realizing what T3 was doing, but more importantly, the who and the why behind it. And this is why T3, there's so much synergy with Culture Shift, in the sense that I give our founders a bunch of credit in the sense that they've looked at this real estate industry, right? They found the flaws in terms of two things. One, this underserved society of emerging tech companies, but also the culture that the industry has bred throughout, right? So what they've done, they built an organization at the foundational level to focus on culture and people first, right? And what has come down to in the next, we started in 2001. Now we're coming into 2020, and now you're looking at a young black man who's about to come to New York, run the New York office, who has a team of 3 women. So it's a young black man managing 3 women in commercial real estate in New York. That doesn't exist, right? That doesn't happen, right? Unless there's a purpose and intention to shift the culture that is the real estate industry itself. So that's really what we're doing, and that's what's getting me excited about this, and being that face, or meeting these individuals in the room that have been there and done that. We can go and share the story to the next generation of youth that can now look at and be like, hey, I want to be a commercial real estate advisor for tech companies. You know what I mean? Like that could be on the list of the dream boards for future, which is exciting, and I think why we all are here.
Verizon actually had a campaign to deal with that, where when you talk about a vision board, what they did was they interviewed all these little kids, asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then what they did was they put all the salaries, all the salaries of these different jobs on a wall. And all of a sudden, these kids are seeing $93,000, $105,000, $200,000, and they're going, "Whoa, these jobs exist?" They had no idea. And again, I just fundamentally believe, and one of the reasons why, when I launched this digital in the show, and one of the reasons we're here in doing these interviews is because we want to be able to use the platform to say, hey, here are people doing things, amazing things, making great amounts of money, controlling things in areas you may not have any clue that exist, and you can actually take your existing skill set or what it is you want to major in college and go in these areas, because I think that's the only way we sort of change the paradigm. And I think about my fraternity brother of mine, agent, sports agent, but also had several other businesses. We flew to NFC Championship game a few years ago and represent Cam Newton.
Okay.
And we were leaving Florida on his private plane. But the real story is that I'm sitting here and I'm watching. I'm looking at who's all in this terminal, and I'm seeing all these little white kids running around with their parents. And it hit me. I said, you got little white kids who are 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, who are growing up, and for them, flying private planes is normal.
It's the norm, yeah.
They lived it, they see it, they experienced it. I said, you got black folks who may be 50 or 60, or may go through life and never ever even know what that experience is. And it just speaks to what groups have been exposed to versus those who have not.
100%.
And these kids are not the children of athletes or entertainers. And that's also the biggest thing. Because again, we think of, you're a rapper, you're an entertainer, you're an actor. No. Not any of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the exposure piece is so vital.
It's huge. And it's matching that exposure with, and right, the next step is then instilling that confidence, to your point, around, hey, what made me a phenomenal football player can actually make me a phenomenal, young professional, right? In terms of my time management, in terms of
Same work ethic.
same work ethic, right?
All things
right.
goes into it.
It goes into it, right? My perseverance. How do you respond to adversity, right? How do you adjust to sudden change, right? How do you build teams? How do you interact with one another? How do you empathize with someone on the other side of the table with you, right? All of these things that make our youth so powerful, so enriched in culture and how they go about their lives can all be applied to these different avenues and different pathways of
Right.
opportunity. But to your point, it starts with the exposure.
That's it.
It starts with the exposure.
All right. Well, certainly good luck with it.
Oh, appreciate you. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
I know.
All right. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. Okay, I need you to really explain to me, what the hell is blockchain? I've had people on my show trying to explain it. I've had my audience going, Roland, we still don't get this. What is it?
Right. Well, I answer this question a lot. So I'll try to keep it very simple because blockchain has different flavors, different iterations. The traditional blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, the first one, was essentially a operation where your computer will answer a cryptographic riddle, a very hard riddle, mathematical riddle. And once you're competing with a bunch of other people trying to run this program too and to solve this mathematical riddle, that's called mining, right? Now, the first computer to solve that riddle with pure processing power, essentially, is awarded a block. That block has the tokens, in this case we're talking about Bitcoin tokens, within that block. So each cycle repeats, and then the miners go at it again for the next block. See who's awarded the next block and the next block. Now, that's a series of blocks, and when you tie them together in a cryptographic secure setting, that's a chain of blocks or a blockchain. In those blocks lie the tokens and the rules, business rules and engagement rules of how that token can act and what it can do.
Okay.
And that's called the smart contract. So that lies inside the block with the tokens.
So what am I doing with it? Like what does it do?
Right. So depending on where you are and who you ask, the Japanese consider Bitcoin a legitimate currency. Tanzania has blockchained their fiat currency, their regular currency. They're bypassing Bitcoin altogether and putting their existing currency onto their own proprietary blockchain.
Okay.
That's where a lot of things are going to be going. That gives you the digital pathways on your phone and everything else to do peer-to-peer money movement without the interference of banks necessarily, or at least not with the over-interference of banks.
Okay.
So it is something that you have two movements. One is that there's these traditional tokens, Ethereum and Bitcoin and all of these that you hear about most of the time.
Right.
And then there's a value token, which is not spoken about, but looks a lot more like loyalty points and redemption points and things like that. So you don't have to have a cryptographically sound blockchain. You can have tokens that look and act like points, but the business rules are then written in to the chain itself. So for instance, in the music industry, what's being talked about right now is creating value tokens that would, number one, allow crowds to fund new acts and new music. So I pay $1 for a token. That token could have special properties. It can be a discount for a ticket to see the artist. It can be a discount towards merchandise. It can be access backstage. It can do a lot of different things, but that will be pre-coded into the life of the token itself.
Okay.
So this is basically two camps when it comes to tokens.
All right. So let me try. Let me for the people at home who are like, I have no idea what he just said. So let me try to break it down this way. So a token can resemble a card, membership card.
It can, yes.
And what I mean by that is, so I have this card, and so I have the card, and if there's a party, I can flash the card, I'm a member. Okay? You can get
Could
in.
do.
Or I flash the card and I get discounts to the movie theater.
Right.
Because I'm a member. So essentially with this token, so whatever is assigned to having that token. You can use it for multiple purposes and multiple uses.
That's right.
Within that quote member club.
Within the ecosystem that you created.
Right. So I can have this card, but if I go to that movie theater, we don't take that card.
That's what happens now. Now, in a highly networked world, which is where we're headed with all of this, with the internet, these would be interchangeable. So using a token exchange, if I had, say, Nike tokens, and I don't know if we want to get into a brand thing here.
Okay, it don't matter.
Okay, so if I had Nike tokens, and I have a bunch of tokens I could discount for 10 pair of sneakers. I don't need those 10 pair of sneakers. I want to trade them for a concert, to see George Clinton's last concert, right? Well, I could do that over an exchange and just use with my phone or my computer, go on and say, who wants these Nike tokens? Who wants that discount? I'll trade you in whatever pricing mechanism is created for tickets to George Clinton, right? So that's the future that we see. That's the future that we're building, actually.
So how does that benefit the ordinary person right now who is sitting there going, I don't know what all that means. I mean, how does it benefit the everyday consumer, that young person, that middle-aged person, that older person? How does it benefit them?
Well, we tend to look at it as value extrusion, not extraction. So we're creating new forms of value. Usually, if you've had a Barnes & Noble card or something like that, it's in your drawer somewhere. You've left value on that card. And as a matter of fact, the brands write that value into their write-offs. They expect you not to use that card at some point or forget you have it or whatever. So you haven't legitimately spent the value that you've earned with them, and after a while it expires, right? So these tokens never expire. You're able to fully use them because you have a rolling log of how much you have on that token at any point, or that whatever token you have at that given point in time, and then you can trade them very easily.
So with the trade, let me interrupt you. Okay, so again, just hit me. So let's say, so I've got points on my credit card. I've got like several 100,000 points. Then I've got miles. I'm Premier 1K on United. I've got miles on American. I've got status there. I've got status on Delta. And then I've got car rental points and all sort of stuff. But with my card points, I'm only able to access the rewards within that card.
That's right.
So to redeem those points, I can go into the website. I can buy this, I can buy that, I can buy this.
Same principle.
And so essentially that's
But more open, right? So you're in a closed ecosystem.
Right.
Right? You maybe with Avis or whatever you happen to be with, or Holiday Inn, whatever hotels you like, Melia.
Yeah,
right. But it's
a Visa credit card.
Right.
So those rewards is just within whatever rewards they have on their list.
Right.
That's all I can use my points for.
Right. We're talking about opening that up and creating an entirely new economy.
So I have
based
those
on that.
points, and then this group over here says, "Oh yeah, you can take your points and use them over here," and they may have a whole list of things something else that I want, and so essentially I'm exchanging. I built the value over here, and I'm exchanging them over here.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the future that we're building.
Okay.
Right.
See, I think that might explain a lot bit easier. Because that's been the hardest point. I mean, people come on my show, talk about blockchain or whatever, and it still always comes down to, okay, but what
does it mean for me?
What is it doing? Like, what am I doing with it?
Well, now, we only talked about value tokens. There's the issue of Bitcoin itself as a store of value or a commodity, like America sees it as an economy, as a commodity, or you have Japan, where they see it as a full-on currency. So that's still a very gray area from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And so that's very funny. You have to be very careful, obviously, in how you handle those kinds of things. And I would suggest everyone take a look at it if you're really interested, but it's not something that is more readily available to non-tech or non-financial people, because it is a little bit harder to grasp, and the rules do change from place to place.
Got it. And when you say that's where we're moving, when do you think it reaches? When does it cross a certain threshold?
Yeah, like a critical mass. Since there's already precedent, because loyalty and rewards points are nothing new, It really is just the digitization of those, and then the legal framework to have these things move back and forth over exchanges.
Okay.
So we're looking, at 5 years, you'll start to see real pickup in this kind of thing. In 10, 15 years, everyone will use them. You won't know the word blockchain. We won't use the word blockchain. It doesn't really matter. It's just a buzzword for tech that we happen to use.
Got it.
We don't walk around and say, loyalty tokens. I have points on my card.
Right,
and I use my points.
Right.
And there it is. So there's
And in
already
fact, you can, like for instance, so I think it's Alamo. So when I rent a car in Alamo, I can either enroll in Alamo's program, or those points can be placed on my American Airlines account.
Right.
So essentially, it's like
Yeah.
So Alamo has to deal with American, and that's sort of like what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
So so versus me accruing my points only through flying on American, when I rent a car in Alamo, I can have those points applied to American Airlines.
Absolutely.
And sort of these. Okay. All right. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, we're announcing next week that we've been working closely with a group that is building what we call an STO exchange in Curacao. So it's a secure tokenization offering, secure token offering. These are fully compliant, like SEC regulated and EU regulated tokens, and you'll be able to do IPOs very easily through this mechanism. So it's grandfathered into Dutch law, so it's a little bit easier than, say, Malta, Gibraltar, these other places that kind of shady, and these kind of things have a lot of baggage attached to them. Mm-hmm. But in a regulatory compliant framework, you can actually do a lot of things. And we're all just building this now, and I have to just stress that it's not something you can do tomorrow.
Right.
But it certainly is something that we bet on long term.
All right. Sounds good. Well, hopefully we'll have a better understanding as it develops.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay woke.
This is Director X, the director of Superfly on the red carpet, or the black carpet, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm Lex Scott Davis, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now. Eee.